Welcome to our informational webinar for the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund. I keep saying that, we need to come up with a cute way to say that acronym, but PUFPA is the best thing we've come up with so far. We are excited that you are all here. Please introduce yourselves in the chat. We're going to go over some Zoom tips in a second, but the primary thing is we're all here to learn. You will get a copy of everything, so don't worry about that. The event is being recorded, so either at the end of today or first thing tomorrow, you're going to get a follow-up email that's got the recording. It'll give you the slide deck. You will also get a link to the program guide, which has the complete application and everything in it. And you will get a copy of the Q&A. Speaking of the Q&A, please put all of your questions into the Q&A, not the chat. By keeping all the questions in the Q&A, it helps us organize them and make sure we're not missing anything. Also, at the end of the webinar, all the Q&A can be exported as a single transcript, so we can quickly get it together and get it out to you. Whereas if questions are in the chat, they're not included there. So if you put questions into the chat, we will just remind you to please move them over to the Q&A. We won't actually respond to them. All right, introductions. I'm Terry Ball. I am the Senior Programs Manager here at Californians for the Arts, and I'm heading up our Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund Adventure. As you probably know, and Sophie, you can move on to the next slide. As you probably know, the Performing Arts League, no, Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund was created by legislation. It is administered by Cal OSBA, and Californians for the Arts is managing the program. You can move on to the next. So here's the Californians for the Arts team. Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates are two separate but sister organizations. Californians for the Arts is your statewide arts advocacy organization, and California Arts Advocates is our comprehensive lobbying arm. So CFTA deals with the state. We do a lot of the grassroots work, and then CAA is the specific lobbying organization. Next. So the webinar guidelines, as I talked about, the questions are always welcome. In the course of the webinar, there's a couple of places that we will specifically stop for questions, but you can go ahead and start putting them now in the Q&A. Beatrice will be responding to questions as we go. We'll stop at those set places. She also, if there's something coming up a lot in the Q&A, or if there's something Beatrice feels like we need to stop and clarify, she will flag me and I will stop. I have a tendency to go too fast, so Beatrice will also slow me down if I'm going too fast. I want to make sure that we leave time for questions, so I have a tendency to move through the information. Please be respectful of each other in the chat. I don't really know why you'd be chatting back and forth, but let's always be respectful. All right, next. There are some tips here. These are also included in the links document that Martha has shared. They're just some easy tips on how to turn on closed captioning at the bottom in case that is helpful for you. Next. There's some information about how to view the webinar that again should be in the links document in case you want to help you view both the chat and the slides. Next, our community partners. Before I go to the community partners, I think there are a few other Zoom tips in the tip document, so check that out. All right, one of our primary goals with the performing arts program is that we make sure everyone in the state who is potentially eligible knows about the program. And in order to help us with this communication, we are working with this group of wonderful community partners to help us spread the word. One of the things all of these community partners are doing is hosting individual webinars. You're welcome to attend any of these, and we'll go over that list in just a second. But in terms of getting the word out about this program, our primary goal, obviously, is to get the word out so that everyone who can possibly be funded is funded. And we don't want, at the end of the day, anyone to not get funded because they didn't know about it. The other thing is getting a very strong response to the program is our first step in our advocacy goal of getting this funding to be continuing. Right now, we have one allotment of funding for 1 year of this program. That will not continue if we don't have advocacy for more funds. It will have to be re-allotted funding every single year. With the previous relief programs, specifically for the performing arts, most of those funds ended up being undersubscribed, which is great because that means everybody that applied got money. But the downside is it's left the impression in the legislature that we ask for more money than we actually need. And so it's very, very critical with this program, if we want this to be an ongoing funded program, that we are fully subscribed and we get a very strong response. This is not the last time during the webinar that I will ask you to do this, but if you know of any organizations that you think might be eligible, please make sure you share the word with them and point them toward the resources and let them know about the program. Next. So this is our list of all of the other webinars. All of the webinars are the same. They're partnered with our different community partners to try to reach as wide a audience as possible. But if for some reason, schedule-wise, you know someone that needs to come to a specific, date, and they're not part of the, part of AXO, or, they're not a Theater Bay Area member, everybody is welcome at all of the webinars, and the content is the same. The only thing that will vary is the Q&A. Okay, next. All right, our co-host for today is our friends from the San Diego Performing Arts League, specifically Wendy Ferris, their membership specialist, is here. And Wendy, would you like to tell us a little bit about the SD Performing Arts League?
You bet. Thank you so much. We're very happy to be partnering for this webinar. And just to mention for the people who are not members of our organization, I see there's a lot of people who are coming in from other areas. The Performing Arts League in San Diego has been around for over 40 years. You can see our mission there on the screen, and we have several programs that support the arts in our county, one of which is Arts Tix. It's the only not-for-profit box office in San Diego. We have a subscriber base of over 15,000 people who we target to provide marketing and weekly promotions for local performances and to increase ticket sales. We also support Cast and Crew, which is a membership-based program designed to support local actors, stage managers, directors, and other performing arts professionals. That arm of our organization provides year-round education, job readiness resources, and connections to paid job opportunities in the arts. One of the sub-programs under Cast and Crew is All City Auditions. And that is where members of Cast and Crew can showcase their talents in front of casting directors from across the county. We also support the Theater Alliance, which is a collaborative, collective of local theaters that are dedicated to networking, resource sharing, and advocacy. We focus on overall support for the theater ecosystem in San Diego. And last but not least is Theater Month, which is coming up in March. It's a citywide celebration of the arts, and we offer discounted tickets during that month to the organizations that participate. Our marketing efforts for Theater Month reach nearly 1 million people across TV, print, radio, and social media to drive attendance and engagement to our arts events across the county. So SDPAL is very proud to be a community partner in initiatives like the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund. And we're honored to collaborate with Californians for the Arts to ensure arts professionals and organizations have access to critical resources that sustain and grow our vibrant art scene. Thank you, Terry.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Okay, Sophie, we can move on to the next slide. So, advocacy works, folks. That's why we're here. And I just want to take a second to celebrate. This program would not exist. We would not be here today launching it without the advocacy of all of you and without the hard work of advocates from all over the state. This was spearheaded and pushed by a group of grassroots advocates and together with Equity, the labor union for actors, and so many other groups. And I just want to remind everyone that advocacy does work, and it's the only thing that does. And the only way, excuse me, that these funds are going to be ongoing is if we continue to raise our voices as a collective to push for improvements like this. Okay, next. So what is the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund? This was created specifically to support small nonprofit performing arts organizations, which are those with revenues under $2 million. And the help is specifically for hiring and retaining employees. The fund reimburses a portion of payroll costs on a quarterly basis, and the program's goal is to restore resilience and build sustainability in the sector through an investment in creative jobs. And as I mentioned before, it's administered by the California Office of the Small Business Advocate and then managed by California for the Arts. The important thing to remember is these are state funds. This is not a grant that is coming from Californians for the Arts. We're only managing the process. The funds are coming from the state. We do not have a specific open date yet, but the portal will open in early March, and we're hoping any day now to be able to announce an exact date. Because this is a brand new program and a brand new process, the state is wanting to move very cautiously to make sure that once we do open, that everything moves slowly. So we are moving them along as quickly as possible, but we do not have an open date yet. Martha, I am seeing your notes. Can you please direct them to someone else? I can't address them right now. Okay, moving on, Sophie, to the next slide. Who can apply for the Performing Arts League? Performing Arts, I'm sorry, the Performing Arts League is stuck in my brain now this morning. So the program is open to both 501c organizations and also Model C fiscally sponsored organizations. There are two separate applications. For the fiscal sponsors, if you are eligible, if you fit the eligibility criteria, you can apply for yourself, and then separately you can apply as a fiscal sponsor for other organizations. And we'll go over that in more detail coming up. Next, the eligibility criteria. This grant is very much based on a set of information and documents that you will submit. There is no narrative. There is no evaluation of the quality of your programs. This is about, do you fit some very specific information and documents that have to be provided. The big eligibility criteria are that you have to be a performing arts organization where you have productions that are open and advertised to the public. You have to be hiring and paying workers as employees. The reimbursements for this program are only available for people who are being paid as employees. Now, these can be both full and part-time employees and permanent and seasonal employees. But independent contractors Any amount of money you're paying to an independent contractor is not eligible for reimbursement. And because this program is set up as reimbursements, you can't apply to the program to get funds to hire employees in the future. It all has to be, you have to currently be paying workers as employees. You have to be in compliance with California's sexual harassment training requirements. This is one that has caused a lot of people confusion. There are specific requirements, and they're different for different sizes of organizations, and they're different for permanent employees versus temporary employees as to how frequently those employees have to receive sexual harassment training. There's a link here in the deck that you will receive. This link is also in the links document. I understand Martha's having some trouble with the chat, but hopefully that document has gotten into the chat, and if not, it will by the time we're done. But you can follow this link. It gives you information on the state requirements. You will not be asked to upload all of the certificates that you get from individuals for doing the sexual harassment training. What you will be asked for is there's a certification of compliance that your authorized signer will complete as part of the application. And there are a number of things that they will be asked to certify. And this is one of those things. You will be asked to certify that you are in compliance with the California sexual harassment training. That is not something, like I said, that you get a specific certificate for. You just have to say that for your organization, you are in compliance. And since it does vary from organization to organization a little bit, that's why you do it as we're going to certify to your compliance. Sorry, lost my train of thought there. The next thing you have to do is you have to have a written DEI policy in place approved by your board. You will be asked to upload a copy of this policy along with the date that it was approved and the last time it was updated. The same is true for an anti-harassment policy. For both of these, you have to have them. You have to have it in writing. It has to be approved by the board. These do not, however, have to have been set up at some time in the past. So now is your opportunity. If you don't currently, then this is a great time to get your organization in compliance with these, and you can still do this, have it approved by your board as long as you do all of that before you submit your application. You also have to have a mission statement. You have to be certified as in good standing by the California Secretary of State. There is a link here to show you where you can go and look that up. And then there is a way on the Secretary of State's website to print your certificate of good standing that you will do, and then you will upload that as part of the process. You're going to have to be able to provide 990s for your last 3 filed years. We need to update the wording here because it's not necessarily the last 3 years, because as all of us know, most of us have not yet filed for 2024 because they're not due yet. So what you need to be able to provide is your last 3 filed 990s, and they need to be within the last 5 years. For those of you that filed the 990 in the postcard, you also you will instead submit the form CTTR1, which is a state form. And the reason being, the postcard doesn't give your income and expense numbers, and this form does. You have to have adjusted annual revenue under $2 million. And we're going to talk about what the adjustments to that revenue are in just a little bit. And you have to not fall under any of the list of ineligible organizations. And Sophie, if you can go to the next slide, we'll show you those. Here's the list of non-eligible organizations. The reason being, the point of this statute and development of this program is specifically to help organizations pay employees. And so the primary goal was to help organizations that had paid performance. paid performers. The reason that the youth organizations were eliminated is because the vast majority, their performers are youth and not paid. And so the program was attempting to help those organizations with the greatest need. Um, so the list is here. There's more details on this list in the guide. One of the questions that immediately comes up is if we are primarily a main stage adult performance organization, but we have youth programs, are we eligible? Yes, as long as the primary mission of your organization is the delivery of performances for the public that have paid performers. So in other words, Ensemble Theater here in Santa Barbara has performances. They also have a youth program. They are eligible because the primary purpose of their organization is not that youth program. On the other hand, also here in Santa Barbara, we have Festival Ballet, which is a youth ballet training organization. They would not be eligible because though they do performances, that is not their primary focus. The ballet classes and the instruction is their primary mission. The other question that comes up around this is if you do have that youth pro, once you're eligible, all of your employees are eligible. So if you do have that youth program, the employees that work on that program are still eligible to be reimbursed. So the separation is about overall eligibility. It is not.
So
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I wanted to clarify the specific questions have come up. If you have adult professional performers on stage being paid, presenting kids shows, that's okay.
Yes.
We're looking to they were looking to pay companies that hire and pay performers, adult performers to do stuff. That's primarily what they were looking at.
Thank you, Beatrice.
Sorry.
It takes a village, as they say, and we are a collective brain. So thank you for that, Beatrice. Okay, next, Sophie. Okay, so the way that this works, as I mentioned, is it is a reimbursement of funds, and those funds are calculated on a quarterly basis, and you get a percentage of your payroll costs. And we're going to talk about those things. The way that percentage is set is based on your adjusted gross revenue. And it's a descending scale. So the smallest organizations are receiving the largest percentage of reimbursement. Those organizations with an adjusted gross revenue of under $250,000 are eligible for a reimbursement of 80% of their eligible payroll expenses. Topping out at the top, organizations between 175,000, 1,750,000 and 2 million, they are eligible for 20% reimbursement. For the adjusted gross revenue, we're going to take the revenue off those three filed 990s that we talked about before, and you're going to take your gross revenue, and then there are a couple of kinds of revenue that are allowed to be excluded. One of the things that we found with previous grant programs is there sometimes people have revenue that is raising their annual revenue, even though it's not changing their actual production revenue. For example, if you're in the middle of a capital campaign or you've gotten a large gift that is specifically designated for capital purposes, that can really throw off what your annual revenue is. So this program allows you to eliminate revenue earmarked by the grantor or the donor solely for capital expenditures. You can also exclude pass-through funds. If you are serving as a fiscal sponsor or for some reason you are passing through money for another organization that is not part of your actual operational revenue, there's also a place where you can exclude that. And finally, the one that is slightly confusing, it is written as funds received pursuant to section 8753.6, which what that actually is California Arts Council funds, but not the regular public grant funds. These are special funds that are received either from the Keep Arts in the Schools Fund or the Arts License Plate Funds. So if you got a general operating grant from the CAC, that you don't exclude. If you got funds from these other special programs, that you can exclude. And there's a place in the application where you'll fill this out and it will do the calculation for you. For these three types of exclusions, if you do enter that you have, for example, capital capital grant that you want to exclude, you will have to provide paperwork to document that. So your grant agreement, your letter, the same as with all three of these. If you put in income that you want to exclude, then you'll have to back that up. So we're going to calculate your 3-year adjusted gross revenue. That's going to give you what we refer to as your reimbursement tier. Okay, next. So what is reimbursable? This is all about employee expenses. So as we mentioned, nothing related to independent contractors. These are just employee expenses. So you're going to take your employee wages. You're going to take workers' comp expenses per employee, pension, retirement, health expenses, and then payroll processing, whether it's payroll company or a paymaster, those fees. Those are what are reimbursable, minus payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, not SDI, but specific unemployment insurance that you pay as an employer. Those are not eligible for reimbursement. So out of your and this includes what is withheld from your employees. So there's going to be a table that you're going to fill out, and it's going to ask for your gross wages, and it's going to ask for these other expenses, and then it's going to ask for the payroll taxes withheld from your employees. And in the formula, it's going to delete that out. So you don't have to delete anything. You start with your gross wages and go across. These are also capped at $10,000 per employee per quarter. And then the percentage of reimbursement comes after that. So if you've got, for one employee, $20,000 worth of wages, workers' comp, retirement, and processing fees, only the first $10,000 of that is eligible. And then if you're an organization over 1.75 million, you would then get 20% of that 10,000. Is that enough numbers thrown at you? Okay, and I think now is a good place, Beatrice. Do you feel like this is a good place to stop? I feel like we've thrown a ton.
Yes, I do have a couple of there are a couple of organizations that are hiring performers not as employees. And what I've said to them is we really need to have them submit separately, but I need to just clarify. We can't give you legal advice. The law in California, however, is that under current law, which this bill was meant to help with, almost all performers in California, unless they have fall under very specific exemptions, have to be hired as employees. And you will need to certify that you're in compliance with all these things. So indeed, if you are hiring performers as independent contractors, that may be a problem, but please submit via email.
And let me say one thing on that. The reality is, for this program, even if you are legally paying them as independent contractors, they are still not eligible for this program.
Right.
This program is set up so it is only employee wages. There are, like your publicist in some cases, you can pay as an independent contractor legally, and that's totally fine. But their wages would still not be eligible for this program.
Well, yes, Yes, absolutely. So you're only ever getting reimbursed for employees' wages and related costs.
Yeah.
All right. But to the eligibility question,
Yeah.
it may also cause you a problem if you are paying most of your performers as independent contractors. You may not be in compliance with California employment law.
Perfect. Thank you. That is an excellent clarification.
Um, we're also getting lots of questions about folks who do multiple things. Again, with that kind of determination, I think you're going to have to email and maybe talk to somebody during office hours to get a better answer for your organization. Generally, your primary purpose has to be producing live performing arts for the public. So film, not covered. Okay. It would be orchestras, dance companies, theaters, things like that. But again, please send us an email. Those are the people today seem to be waiting patiently and listening. And so I think everything's
Excellent.
going all right. Yeah.
Okay. Then let's go on to the timeline, Sophie. All right. So, as I mentioned, we do not have a specific opening date other than early March. So the timeline doesn't have a lot of specific dates in it, but I want to give you a feel for what the process is going to be. So the application portal will open. You'll submit your application along with your reimbursement for the first 2 quarters of payroll expenses. We're going to go over this in more detail, but the grant is technically a year period. And those 4 quarters that year is going to cover are going to be Q3 and Q4 of 2024, Q1 and Q2 of 2025. So when you're submitting these applications, submitting your application, some of these expenses are going to be actual that you've already completed, and some are going to be projected that are coming in. We are having, so the 2 retroactive quarters, you'll submit the documentation for those so that we can begin the process of getting those reimbursements at the same time that we are doing the application approval. So the application is submitted. CFTA does the initial review of all of the applications. We'll let you know if there are problems with your application. If, in some cases, they may be problems that could be corrected, like we can't read this document, or we have a question. Once we do the review, we will pass those on to Cal OSBA that will do the final approval. Once they have approved, and these will all be reviewed on a first come, first served basis as they are received. Now, if there's an issue with your application, like, for example, we can't read your documents, then that's going to slow you down in the process because we will keep moving forward with applications that can be. So that behooves you to make sure all of your information is clear and legible when it is submitted, so you don't fall behind in line. So your application will be approved. Then you will get a grant agreement. And once the grant agreement is signed, then Cal OSBA will begin processing your payment for those first 2 quarters. Bearing in mind that not unlike the CAC, this is a state organization. It's big, so things move slowly. So from the time the grant agreement is signed, it will be 45 to 90 days before you receive your check. So when you get that grant agreement, you want to sign it and get it back immediately. If we contact you at some point during the process to say, we got a problem, we got a question, respond as quickly as possible. We're going to talk about this later, but I reiterate here, the primary contact for your application must be someone that is actively watching that email. You don't want this to be an email that isn't checked for 3 weeks, because that's what we're going to do to contact you if there's a problem, if we have a question, and to say, here's your grant agreement, get it signed. So keep in mind, you can't control the state's portion of it. They can only move as fast as they can. But what you can control is your portion. Okay. So then after the initial application period and the organizations that are told, yes, you have the grant, those first reimbursements will be processed. And then once Q1 of 2025 ends, then the process will begin for submitting that documentation. Then again, once it's all submitted, 45 to 90 days for those reimbursements. The same thing will then happen at the end of Q2 for those documents. And then the final step will be there as a final report that you will submit that will be, again, not a narrative. This is going to be about numbers and your employment numbers and things for this year so that we can go back to the state and show the impact of the dollars. Okay, next. This slide really just walks you through in words the things that I just talked about in the timeline. Couple of things to bear in mind are when we're talking about quarters here, these are all calendar quarters for everyone, even if you are on a separate fiscal year. For all of this, when we talk about the quarters, we're talking about calendar Q3 and Q4 of 2024 and calendar Q1 and Q2 of 2025. All right, next. Before we start talking about the application, the one other thing to know is when you are submitting your numbers for your payroll, both your actual and your projected, your grant will then be awarded based on those projections. And that will be basically a guaranteed not to exceed amount. So that we can figure out how many grants we're able to do before we run out of money. We have $12.5 million. Our anticipation is that the need is actually greater than that. So we want to be able to keep a running tally so we don't commit to anyone and say, yes, you're granted, and then not have the funds to fund them. So we'll talk more about this in the projections when we talk about your payroll expenses. But when we are accepting applications, at some point, we will believe that we're probably to the point where we've maxed out the program. We're going to continue accepting applications and reviewing applications to create a wait list. And you will be told you are actually approved or you're approved, but you're on the wait list. The reason for the wait list is twofold. Number one, because we're awarding the grants based on projected income. If people's actual income is less than they project, then there will be leftover funds and we can potentially move to the wait list. As we all know, in production, sometimes things don't happen like we think they're going to. The other reason, quite honestly, for gathering the wait list is to help us establish the level of need and to help us be able to demonstrate how great the need is for these funds. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the actual application process. We are using a portal system called GoSmart. Sophie, you can go on to the next one. And something you can do right now is you can go into the GoSmart system and set up your account within the portal. If you have used the GoSmart system for another organization's applications, you'll need to set up a new account specific to California Arts and Cal OSBA. If you have already set up an account with this particular portal for Californians for the Arts, then you can use that. The other thing is, it's very important that when you're setting up your account, you set it up as an organization, because this application is only open to organizations. So if you set up your account as an individual, you won't be able to apply. They have a really great tech tips page that has videos that take you through setting up your account. It's a very simple system to work with anyway, but I find the tech tips very helpful. So that link is here. It will also be in the links document. This is all stuff you can do right now. The application isn't live yet. The portal is. So you can go in and set up your account and get ready to go with that. Once you get to the application, you won't have to do the whole thing in one session if something happens. Also, you can save and come back. Also, you don't have to do it beginning to end. There's a navigation bar on the side, so you can jump to the different sections if you want, in terms of completing it. All right, Sophie, next. So here's just the process for creating your account. Noting that there's a specific link to the portal, which is in the links doc. You're going to log in, you're going to set up your account as an organization, and then you're going to complete the primary information. Now, the person that is setting up the account does not need to be your authorized signer. This can be your primary contact. The authorized signer or authorized signatory is who is going to have to sign off on the grant at the end. You're going to identify that person. There's also, separate from that, a primary contact. If your organization is such that these two people are the same, that's totally fine. But for some organizations, your authorized signer might be your board president, or it might be your board treasurer. It has to be someone listed on your statement of information as an officer. And you can check who those are at that same Secretary of State website that we talked about earlier. Make sure, though, that you're looking at who the officers are. Your statement of information also lists an agent. The agent is not an authorized signer. The agent is just someone who can accept service if your organization gets sued. So those are two different things.
Of course,
so
they could be.
Yes, no, they can all be the same person, but don't check just the agent, because sometimes the agent is separate. And for some organizations, your executive director will be an authorized signer, and for some organizations, they're not. It just varies given size and scale. Go to your statement of information, check while you're there that you're up to date, and then check who your authorized signers are, and then make the decision if you want this to be all one person, if you want it to be two different. If your authorized signer is your board president, you probably don't want that to be your primary contact, because they're probably not going to be checking their email with the same fervor as a staff person or your executive director or someone like that. So you're going to set up that primary information. Then here's a list of information that you need when you set up your account. This portion is designed by the portal and not us, so the wording on a couple of the questions is a little strange. But what you need is your 501c3 determination date. I think they listed as incorporation date. And so it's your 501c3 determination date, and then also the date your organization was formed. That may all be the same thing. They may be different things. The other thing that it asks for, and this helps us with advocacy, is your state. It says House district in our state. That's the assembly. Again, Go Portal covers several states in the Western region. And so that's why it says House and not assembly, and also your state Senate district. There is a link here, which will also be in the links document, to look up your legislators in case you don't know your specific district. Okay, next. So that's the portion you can do now. That's setting up your account portal. Now we're going to talk specifically about the applications. the information that we've just talked about that you're going to put into your portal will roll over to your application. So you won't have to repeat that same information again. It goes into the system. And quite frankly, then if you do any more applications through this portal, like your supplement reports and your applications, your reimbursement submissions, that same information will roll over. Okay, so the important thing with the applications is there are two separate applications. When you come back to apply, you're going to look and you're going to either say, I'm a 501c3 applying on my own, or I'm a fiscal sponsor applying for a fiscally sponsored organization. Again, if I'm a fiscal sponsor, but I also meet the eligibility requirements, I can apply as a 501c3 for myself, and then I can apply for up to 10 fiscally sponsored organizations. You do a separate application for each one. And the thing to remember about the fiscally sponsored applications is the application will ask you for different informations for the two things, the fiscal sponsor and the fiscally sponsored organizations. The fiscal sponsor is the legal entity that will be granted. So the authorized signer is for the fiscal sponsor, because they're the ones that are going to have a statement of information. With the fiscal sponsor applications, you want to be very careful and make sure you're reading which question, because there's some things that you're going to submit, like a mission for both the fiscal sponsor and the fiscally sponsored. There are other things where they're only going to want it about the fiscally sponsored organization. The production related questions are all going to be about the fiscally sponsored organization. Okay, next. So the first thing we're going to do is it's going to ask you some basic information about your organization. Carrying over the information we've already covered, we're going to need to know, do you have a DBA? Is your mailing address different than the business address that you set up your account with? There are some pieces of information that the statute specifically asks for, that we need to collect for the state. For example, the county that you're in, and also the primary performance venue size. So there may be some questions that come up in the application that you go, why do you care? But the reason is, these are in the statute. We have tried very, very hard to make this as straightforward as possible and not ask for extraneous information. But there are certain things, for a number of different reasons, that we do have to collect. There are some of these questions, like county, like venue size, that are required, but they will not impact your eligibility. So you have to answer them in order to be eligible. But the answer itself, for example, if you have a small venue size as opposed to a large venue size, you are not, more or less eligible. Those do not impact the eligibility, but we do have to collect them. Okay, next. So the next thing is there's a group of documents about your organization that you will have to upload. Again, this is something you can be working on right now. You can go and collect all of these. I would recommend creating a folder on your computer so you have all your PDFs ready. That way, the day of, when you go to fill things out, you're just uploading. You already have them all labeled nicely, ready to go. So you're going to need some very obvious things. You're going to need your 501c3 determination letter. You're going to need a copy of your articles of incorporation. You're going to need the certified business, the certification of status with the Secretary of State that we talked before. You're going to need those 990s that we talked about. You're also going to need your organization's DEI and harassment policy. I apologize. I thought we'd straightened this out. There are some places where we have EDI and some places where we have DEI. I'll correct that. It's all the same thing. Yes.
We have gotten a couple of questions around DEI, EDI, I'm not sure. It is a requirement in the statute. Remember, the statute was passed a couple of years ago. And it's a common requirement for California grants and cities in California even and county grants. I think there is some concern about, turning one in and then having that counted against you. Unfortunately, that's not something we can surmise or comment on, but it is a requirement of the statute.
Yeah, and if that changes, we will alert people. But at this point, we have not received any notification that will change. Right. Also, the content will not be evaluated of your statement. This is another place where it is a requirement that you provide it. We will not be evaluating your policies.
To clarify more on that too, this is something that you'll be certifying that you have and that you've adopted, and so you should know that somebody is going to have to sign. We have one of these. We've adopted it. This is when it was updated in the certification.
Yes. Okay. Next. So now we've established that you're an organization. We've established you're a legitimate organization with all your ducks in a row with the state. Now we're going to establish that you are presenting performances for the public. And the way we're going to do this is with the submission of documents. You're going to select 3 different productions from 3 different years in the last 5 years. One of those productions, you're going to submit 3 documents selected from this list, one each from 3 different categories. So, for example, 2021, you did Angels in America. So you could submit a box office report, evidence of paid advertisement, and a review. You cannot submit 3 box office reports. You can submit any of these 6 items, one each, so that you have a total of 3. Then you're going to go to another year and select another production and give 3 pieces of evidence for that production. And then finally, a third year with 3 different productions. These can come from 2024. It's just any time in the last 5 years. They do not have to be tied to the same years as your 990. There just has to be 3 productions, 1 per year, and 3 unique pieces of evidence for each production. All of these are going to be saved as PDFs and uploaded. So again, you can start collecting these now and have them organized for you for application day. How are we doing, Beatrice?
We're fine. We just got an interesting question about can the 990 exclude Schedule B? The 990 needs to be the same as whatever you filed with the IRS, and corporate nonprofit 990s are already public documents. But it needs to match whatever you filed with the IRS.
Perfect. John, can you please move your question over to the Q&A and we will address it over there. Okay, then let's continue. So I know this is a dense slide. Take a deep breath. It's all going to be okay. So this is there are a series of tables in the application that are set up as spreadsheets where you're going to plug information in and it will then calculate the answers for you. The first one is the income table. This is going to calculate that gross revenue we talked about. So there's going to be a spreadsheet, a PDF that you're going to download and you're going to complete it. And then there'll be a place in the application for you to upload it. So you're going to start with your total revenue. You're going to take that for 3 different years. You're going to fill out the year of your 990. Then you're going to fill in the total revenue from the 990 or the 990 EZ or your CTTR1. Then it's going to ask, do you have any donor restricted funds for capital expenditures that you want to exclude. If you don't, just put a 0 there. Then it's going to say, do you have pass-through funds collected for another organization? If you do, great, put it in there. If not, put a 0. And then finally, the funds pursuant to section 8753.6, which again, CAC funds, not annual grant funds. This is only if you're receiving funds from the special Arts in the Schools Fund and Arts license plate funds. And I know those funds contribute some to the general operating, but that's not what we're talking about here. This is only if you received a specific letter or grant from the state saying you are getting a grant from the Keep Arts in Schools Fund, or you are getting a grant from the Arts License Plate Fund. Those are the only funds that can be excluded in this section. For all three of those, if you say yes to those and have a number, then you will need to upload your documentation to establish those. Sadly, we cannot work on the honor system. So you will need to upload documentation on those. The form will then calculate your adjusted gross revenue. You can then look back to the chart and that will tell you what your percentage of reimbursement ultimately will be. Okay, next. All right, payroll expenses, part 1. As we talked about, we're going to submit payroll expenses for 4 different quarters. 2 quarters, they are your actual expenses. 2 quarters, they're going to be projected expenses. Let's talk first about the actual. Again, there's going to be a lovely spreadsheet that Sophie made for you that's going to ask you to enter information, and then it's going to do the math for you. You will be entering these for each individual employee. And in the actual expenses, it's everybody's employee name. So you're going to start with their name. Then it's going to ask for your hourly wage. This number is not included in the calculation. It is only there because one of the requirements of one of the eligibility factors is that you are paying your employees at least the prevailing minimum wage in your city, county, state, whichever is highest. So the state minimum wage is there, but if your city or county has a higher minimum wage, that's the minimum wage you have to abide by. So the hourly wage is there just so we can establish that. If you pay people, people are paid on a salary, if you're paying a flat fee, all of that is fine. You still just need to calculate what the hourly rate you are paying people. And that is entered in there. Then on the next, you're going to enter the gross wages for that particular quarter for that particular employee. You can get this off your payroll reports from your payroll service, your paymaster, but it's the gross wages that you are going to enter. Then in the next column, it's the combined employer expenses for health and welfare benefits. So if you have health insurance that you're paying for your employees, if you have a retirement plan that you're paying for, those expenses can be entered in this area. Again, you will be providing documentation for this. Then payroll processing expenses. What do you pay your paymaster or your payroll service to get your payroll processed? This is going to be calculated on a quarterly basis by employee and entered. So you're not entering on one line the total amount you paid for the quarter to paychecks to process you're entering the amount that you paid for the specific employee. So in some cases, you may have to do math based on if they charge you an aggregate amount, you're going to have to calculate down what it was per employee. Then the same for your workers' comp. The quarter per employee per quarter. Then there's going to be something that asks you, there's going to column that asks for the taxes withheld for state and federal taxes from the employee's gross wages. This is not asking for the employer paid portion, because you can't include that anyway, but we need to decrease the gross wages by federal and state taxes that are withheld, because no payroll taxes can be included in the total amount. So you're going to enter all of that, and then the form will total up the amount of eligible payroll expenses for the quarter for each employee. The program will cap it at 10,000. So that if you had $20,000 in expenses, it's still going to say 10,000. Now remember, 10,000 is not what you will be reimbursed for if you are determined to be eligible. You take that 10,000 and now you go to the tier table to calculate what percentage of 10,000 you are eligible for. Again, as we talked about before, these are all of the employees of your organization, but these have to be W-2 employees. No independent contractors, no just outside contractors. These are employees that you pay that will get a W-2 at the end of the year. Okay. Next. Part 2 is your projected expenses. Still, all the breakdown is the same. The difference is now you might not know all their names. So you might know we're doing Swan Lake in Q1, and I haven't cast it yet, but I do know all of the roles that will be there. And, I know I'm going to have a lighting designer. I know I'm going to have a scenic designer. So in the place of the name, you can put the role. You still want to have one line for each individual person that will be paid. Even if you don't know their name, you're still going to calculate it all the same. Now, the amount of your grant, as I mentioned before, is like a guaranteed not to exceed. So your projections here will set the maximum that your grant can be. Your actual reimbursement when it happens will be on the expenses that you actually submit. So you want to try to be as accurate as possible. Don't undersell yourself, but also there's no great gain in wildly over projecting, because all that is going to do is, number one, that's not the amount you're going to get anyway. You're going to get the actual amount. And that just means there's probably other people's grants that we can't fund if we tie up a lot of expenses because everyone has way over projected their expenses, and yet that's not real money. So please, I know this is a little awkward and weird. Don't underestimate yourselves, but also please don't wildly overestimate. If they are insanely high, if you have the roughly the same amount of production, but grossly higher income in these projected, that may cause us to flag and slow down your application and contact you and say, what's up? So yes, Beatrice, oh God, you wanted to say something.
The question came up and I answered fairly quickly and then realized that there's more nuance, specifically with respect to Schedule B and whether that is required to be included, which is a list of large donors. I think we need to do more research on that.
I will say in the past with the state, my anticipation is what they normally want is your complete routine,
return of the
return. Thank you. Return. Routine was the only thing my mouth would say. Yeah, normally what they want is your complete return with every schedule. We will
It was
clarify
brought up,
that.
yeah, it was brought up that California is not requiring, doesn't require Schedule B, but it specifically refers to IRS. So I think we just need to go back and ask more questions, and we will get back to you on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, okay. So I then the form then that you're going to fill out on these payroll expenses is the exact same as the previous form. It's just that now we're doing projections instead of actual. Okay, Sophie, next. In the program guide, you will see samples of all of this. It goes into even more detail. I didn't want the webinar to take 4 hours, so we're not showing every single screen, but all of that additional detail is in fact in your program guide. I encourage you all to treat it like your study sheet. Go through, you can fill in all your answers, you can prepare all of your documents now, and that way you have time for questions. Okay, so the payroll expense documentation that you will need to upload. This is an area where not everyone's reality is the exact same because payroll services, you have different documentation than paymasters. And so we have a list of things, but you will need to establish the all of the expenses that you are submitting for wages, as long as you are not with a paymaster that files, collectively the quarterly tax returns. If you have a quarterly statement for your wages, that will be the cleanest, easiest thing. That's got all of the information you need, and that will be the easiest thing to submit. Also, it could be your quarterly payroll register from your paymaster or payroll service. For workers' comp, I realize many people do not have a detailed by employee breakdown for that what they pay for their premiums for workers' comp. What you're going to need to do in that case is provide evidence of what you paid and then the documentation for the calculations for how you came to the amount. So, I pay $1,000 a year for workers' comp. I've got 15 employees, and calculated out by quarter by employee. The same is for your health, pension, and retirement expenses. Those probably are very detailed, and you can provide those invoices. Again, for your payroll paymaster fees, some of that is going to be easy to break down by individuals. Some of it may be aggregate. In all of this, you're going to provide the evidence. If you think there's any explanation that is needed, just provide it. All this is going to be done as PDFs. It's never a bad idea to include a note if you think anything needs to be explained. Okay. So, do we need to pause here for any questions, Beatrice?
Yeah, we're getting questions around folks being paid less than minimum wage, or working hours that when you figure them out, it's actually less than minimum wage. That actually is specifically intended not to be covered by the statute. You need to talk to a labor attorney because I can't tell you specific practices, but I can tell you that if you are paying somebody as an employee and then they're continuing to do the same work for a number of hours beyond that as a volunteer, that is almost certainly illegal under California law. Ask your attorney, but it's probably going to make you ineligible under this for this grant. Yeah. Let's see what else. So musicians, yes, musicians that you do not have W-2s for are not going to, you're not going to be eligible for reimbursement for those wages, for that payment to those musicians. Anybody who is not an employee, you can't get reimbursed for. So volunteer stipends, independent contractors, not eligible to be reimbursed. You're only getting reimbursed for your employees. And the other question that is coming up around is that calculation of minimum wage or of what wages you're paying them. And I did answer that the concern was that you be paying at least minimum wage and that we will get back to them. Several people, including my company, pay people different wages, different rates, depending on what work they're doing. And so we will get back to you as to how you would calculate in that case. I think the concern is that you not be paying, in any case, less than minimum wage. But yeah, so we'll get back to you on that one.
And what I can tell you on that is, you know that you're paying them a different amount at different times. So you don't need to take your gross, you don't need to take the gross wages and divide it by a set number. But what is the lowest minimum wage you pay an individual? So if you're
Okay.
paying somebody one rate as an actor and another rate when they come in to paint scenery, what's the lowest amount you ever pay that person per hour?
Good. Thank you, Terry. I was confused about that. I wasn't sure if it was being used in a calculation, in which case
Yeah.
I was saying, well, maybe you
Yeah.
average. So that actually answers the question. Put down whatever the lowest
Yeah.
rate is. And it
Yeah.
needs to be minimum wage or above. And remember, minimum wage is the higher of whatever your city or county or the state. So, but it's whatever's highest that applies to you.
Yes. Where
If,
your where your business is located, what is the highest there? And then, yeah, that hourly, because we know different people, pay different rates and all of that. So that hourly wage is there completely separate from the calculations. It is simply, you are, and that's one of the things that you will attest to in the certification, that is the lowest, that is the lowest amount you are paying anybody by the hour.
oh, okay. If you were using a paymaster, all right, or a payroll who is employer of record, and they are paying and they are issuing the W-2s, those are still, and you are funding that, they still count. Those are your employees. I get it that they're not your employee for employer of record, but that still counts. So you don't have to worry about that when, because they are employed by you through this other company, this paymaster. That's okay.
Yeah, because you legally are still their employer. They are the employer of record, but
Right.
you are still an employer, which is why you still have employer legal responsibilities to them. It's just the other is the employer of record. The
Yes.
other thing in that case where Beatrice is talking about, that's where you might not have your individual state quarterly statement, because some paymasters issue those for individuals, some paymasters issue them simply for all of their employees. But yeah, as long as, and one of the other questions that we've had around paymasters is, your primary business has to be in California. If you use a paymaster that is out of the state of California, that's okay. The paymaster doesn't have to be your primary business, has to be. Okay, we only have 13 minutes left. So I want to go through the end, and then we can catch any more questions unless you have something burning. Okay, next. All right, as we talked about before, there are certain questions, and there's a bunch of them at the end that we are collecting, either because they're required in the statute or in our contract as Californians for the Arts to administer this program. We have certain reporting things, that certain items we have to report to Cal OSBA. All of this is not to be intrusive or invasive. It's to be able to make the case to the state, look at the wonderful work these funds are doing, and look how they are impacting different geographic and ethnic and racial, et cetera, rural versus urban, all of these kinds of things we want to be able to report to the state. So we have to ask you. Okay, so all of these questions, it's required that you answer, but they do not impact your eligibility. Next. And so at the end, as we have talked about, there will be a certificate of compliance. This will be fillable PDF. It again will be available so you can download it beforehand. This is completed by your authorized signer, not your primary contact. There are a number of statements that are, yes, we're in compliance with sexual harassment. Yes, we're in compliance with labor law. Your authorized signatory is going to initial each of those and then sign it off at the bottom. In the case of fiscal sponsors, you're going to sign, and also a primary contact, the fiscal sponsor, authorized signer will sign it, and also a senior person from the fiscally sponsored organization. So you're both going to say, yep, everything we've said is true and accurate. Were you trying to say something, Beatrice? Okay.
No, sorry.
All right, no, that's okay.
I had no poker face. I was responding to something. Sorry, everybody.
That's all right. Next. Just a pretty picture. Okay, next. Okay, yay, you've done it. You've submitted your application. You will get a confirmation email. If you don't get a confirmation email, you think you've submitted and you don't, log back into the portal and make sure it says submitted. And if you have any questions, email the PAEPF at CA for the Arts email address. And then make sure that primary contact is checking your email and your spam filter regularly. And the strange thing is sometimes these go to spam filters, and even if you keep telling them don't, they still go to the spam filter. So keep checking that spam filter. Okay, next. Resources. Next. Things that you can do now, as we've talked about. Email. Get an appointment for office hours if you want some more one-on-one. Review the application guidelines. Review all the questions. You can always attend a second webinar. You can go back and watch this webinar. Go in and set up your Go Smart portal. Don't wait till the day of to do that. There's no reason. Start gathering your documents and organizing your information. Make sure that authorized signer is current on your statement of information. Make sure your statement of information is current. Okay, next. This is again the tips for the Go Smart portal. I would really recommend going there. Next. This is information. This is also included in the program guide on how to go in and search yourself in the Secretary of State website. And this is separate from the Register for Charitable Trusts. That's not what this is. This is the Secretary of State, and it shows you how to get your status, and you can also check your statement of information here. Next. We've talked about make sure that it's a valid and regularly used email. Next. Ask for help. The PAEPF email is there. We're all here to help. Martha will be doing office hours. I do always strongly encourage people when you're asking for help on this kind of stuff to ask by email as opposed to on the phone, only because then you have a record. It's easier for us to be clear and for you to be able to have the information to go back and read, as opposed to in a conversation where you have to be taking notes. So I always encourage you, if you're really confused and you want to talk to a person, that's totally cool. But then follow up with asking your question in an email, because then you have a record of what you were told. There's no, telephone tag. Oh, I thought they said. And as you go back to implement whatever you've been told, you've got something there to refer to. Next. Okay. I would be remiss not to encourage you to consider membership in both California for the Arts and CAA. For those of you who are in the San Diego area, San Diego Performing Arts League, all of these organizations, this is how we exist. This is how we have the funds to be able to provide the services that we do. Next. Um, Speaking of advocacy works and their strength in numbers, coming up in April, we have the California Arts and Culture Summit in Sacramento, which is a day of workshops and speakers about arts advocacy and arts in the state of California. And then on the 23rd, we have Arts Advocacy Day. This is a free day for everybody to come to the state. CFTA and CAA help organize meetings with legislators. Start with the rally in the park, and those pictures that we showed earlier of everybody signing with the signs saying, fund SB 1116, that was advocates at Advocacy Day who then went to individual legislator offices and made the case. CFTA provides talking points. So it is a great day to come and be in community with arts advocates and arts workers from across the state, and makes a huge impact on legislators when we've got 300 people sort of roaming the halls of legislative offices. It's also just really cool and fun. So the information is there. I encourage you to come and participate and raise your voices as we are fighting like crazy right now for arts funding. Next. And then we just have more fun pictures. I think that's the end. Are we at the end, Soph? So the big things, go away with that performing arts PAEPF email. Watch for the follow-up email with the recording of the webinar, the program guidelines. Do we have any more questions, Beatrice? We've got 5 minutes left.
I believe we've answered all the ones in the Q&A.
I want to encourage everybody to save the chat now. If you save it now, it will go to a document. You'll have any conversations you've had. You'll have all the links. You'll have everything in there.
All right. Thank you to the team. I absolutely couldn't do this without all of you. Yes, we have, yes, Dory, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. I really encourage anybody else, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, because then we have a record and we can share that with other people who weren't able to be here. As long as the questions are in the Q&A, then we can answer them for everyone. But Dory, if you want to unmute, and I have to allow you.
You have to give her that permission. Yep.
And I'm sorry, I'm not seeing you in the attendees. So can you just go ahead and type your, yeah, I don't know why. I don't have a Dory in the attendees. So if you could just type your question into the Q&A, Beatrice can answer that really quickly.
If you want to save the chat, you go down to the little 3 dots at the bottom of the chat, right? And press them, and it says save chat, and go ahead and click on that.
All right. Do we have anything else?
The Q&A will be saved later and posted so that you can access it.
And it will come out in the follow-up email.
Yes.
Every email that is registered for the webinar will get a follow-up email with a link to the recording, a link to the slide deck, a link to the links, a link to the production guide, and the Q&A.
Somebody has typed something about being down for COVID. We were shut down as everybody was. So yes, if that affected your production, you can go back up to 5 years. I'm imagining that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Is Doris Salois or Salois? I'm not sure how you say your name, Dory. Yes.
And if not, you can email a more detailed question to the PAEPF. Martha will be on that this afternoon, answering any follow-up questions. But yes, that's specifically why it's listed as 3 out of the last 5 years, because we do know, and that it's been an up and down. A lot of us were shut down, specifically came back, and then maybe skipped a year because of the people did well when there was additional relief funding, and then it tapered off again.
And I guess I should clarify, though, if you have been filing the 990s, you need the 3 that we need are the 3 most recent. So yeah, you don't get to choose whatever 5 990s you want from the last 5 years. It's that's just correct. In case for some reason something happened one year and you didn't file one. So
yeah. And your productions don't have to be tied specifically to those 990s. The production documents could be like from 24, 23, and 22, even if you haven't filed your 24 990 yet. Because you should obviously be filing your 990s even if you're not producing. Yes.
The question, does sexual harassment policy refer only to full-time employees? They use, I see only the term employee. That's because it does apply to part-time employees that work at least 100 hours and 6 months. No, oh my gosh, Terry, please help me. It does apply to part-time employees. Look up, go to we've provided you with a link to go to the California Civil Rights or whatever it's called.
And
Yeah.
just to be even more clear, it applies to full-time and part-time, and it applies to permanent
Temporary.
and temporary.
Yes.
So if you're hiring people for a show, 30 days, let's see. If an employee is hired to work for less than 6 months,
Yes.
but has not worked in the 30 days after being hired, then the hire date is the first date of work.
So anybody who's employed for less than 6 months part-time, temporary employees still have to get harassment if they're with you. So they have to get it within 30 days. Unless they don't work at 100 hours. So
Yes.
yes. So for example, I'll use my theater as a guinea pig. We typically have production employment of about eight weeks. They rehearse and perform more than 100 hours. And so within 30 days, everybody has to get that. So that's just me giving you sharing advice, sharing what Ophelia's Jump does. But there is a link in there that'll tell you exactly what to do.
Yeah. The one thing to keep in mind is there are limitations to what we can provide in terms of, we can't do legal advice, we can't do tax advice. We can advise you about the statute. We can advise you about preparing, and we can provide you with resources. But we are not lawyers.
Yes.
Labor lawyers, tax lawyers, any of that. And there are limitations on what we can provide. The one thing that I didn't mention before, I'm not sure if any of our friends from Cal OSBA are here today, but if they are, welcome. I will tell you that it is difficult to be a state or agency for them, but they are trying very, very hard to understand this industry. They specifically contracted with, there was an RFP, but they specifically contracted with someone to manage the program that was from within the industry, because they realize that we are a unique industry, that we have different challenges and setup, and they are being very responsive to listening to us as the advisors about the industry. So we encourage you to do your research, prepare, spread the word. Please let anybody that you know, any advocacy, or I'm sorry, any outlet that you have to let people know this program is here. Please share it. We want to make sure that everyone that is eligible for this funding gets a shot at it. With that, we are 2 minutes over. Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye-bye.